Hello Monday, a nice new week. Right, the first thing that we're going to look at here, there aren't many figures, but it takes a bit of thinking about. So you might want to pause somewhere along the line and get up to speed with this. Top left, country. Across the top, taxes as a percentage of GDP. Then public sector spending as a percentage of GDP. Now, I'm going to ask you to go down to the bottom right first, which is 37.1, and read across left that that's Japan, and up that it's public sector spending as a percentage of GDP. Public sector spending as a percentage of GDP. That's the lowest in the list, vertically, up and down, and that's in Japan. The next highest is the United States at 39. 39% of GDP is public sector spending. It's low, like Japan's is low. Then we can go to the next highest, which is Germany at 44. United Kingdom at 47, Greece at 47, and France here, in France, public sector spending as a percentage of GDP is high at 53. Okay, then we go over to taxes as a percentage of GDP. And let's go down to the bottom again at Japan and the United States, who are the lowest, who have the lowest taxes as a percentage of GDP. The tax intake to the central government as a percentage of GDP. 28 and 27 respectively, and that's a long way short of their percentage for public sector spending. It's 12% short. The United Kingdom at 39 is 8% short, but let's have a look at Germany there. 41% taxes as a percentage of GDP, and 44 was public sector spending. Almost no gap, only a small 3% gap. What Germany is doing is saying, well, the games we play is that the budget is the amount that we can get in taxes and a bit of borrowing if we really have to. In other words, they try to play the game. German taxes coming in as a percentage of GDP 41, public sector spending as a percentage of GDP, money going out from the central at 44. They nearly balance. Up at the top you can see Greece is well short and France is halfway in between, a bit short. But there, down at the bottom, the United States is obviously not playing the game at all. 27% for the taxes and 39% as public sector spending as percentages of GDP. Germany is playing the game that they've decided to play, the household state expenditure game, that the state spends money that it either taxes or borrows. Germany has decided to tax that money in, and the United States has decided to tax some of that money in and borrow the rest. Nothing we don't know, but it's interesting to have it here as a bit of a table. Okay, I regret putting this one in now. Central banks, this is tricky stuff. Fed panel on IOER, which is interest on excess reserves. Fed's key tool, nominal GDP targeting. Tricky, we'll leave that. That's later in the article if you're interested in nominal GDP targeting, which is big subject on the internet, around the econ blogs. 3 Fed bank presidents. Let's go down to the second to last paragraph. Kocherlakota said IOER will be our main tool when it comes to reversing policy. I'd really put this in only for SNED, because I think it's only SNED and I that's really interested in when the Fed or central banks come to reversing policy, how the bloody hell are they going to do it? And the only way is interest on excess reserves and basically paying more. And nobody understands it, so I'm just not going to go into it. Moving on to a Doug Short chart about the United States of America and their real median household income. Now, Doug Short doesn't have to be right with this chart. But I don't think he's going to be too much wrong with this chart. So it's real, so that means adjusted for inflation, median, the middle one, isn't it? Household income in the 21st century. So you start at 0 and you end at -8. So the median household is 8% down on where it was 12 years ago. Now that's median, that means everybody's involved and you just pick the middle one, I think, if I've got median right. And we know that the rich households at the top, really the top 30%, but obviously the higher you get in that percentage to the top 1%, top 1% of the 1%, etc., have done extremely well. And their household income has gone up greatly, and they are involved in this figure. So if the overall thing has gone down 8%, including the people that have done so well, we can presume that the people that haven't done so well are an awful lot worse off than the -8%. Yeah. Okay, moving on. Canada, economy slowed in a third quarter on exports. Again, I'll read the last paragraph. The world's 11th largest economy, Canada, relies on exports for a third of output and is being hobbled by renewed global strains such as Europe's debt crisis, slowing Chinese growth, and possible US budget cuts. Finance Minister Jim Flaherty this month increased his deficit forecast on lower commodity prices, while Bank of Canada Governor Mark Carney, who's going to go to the BOE, but everyone knows that. I looked quite a lot into that, and all I found out is Mark Carney isn't the sort of person that I'd like to have tea with. Said on October the 24th, the case for raising his 1% policy rate is less imminent. In other words, the interest rates will not be going up in Canada anytime soon because of this sloppy weakness, all blamed on other people in the world not buying the Canadian resources. Right. This is from Yanis Varoufakis, and I like the way he's done the bullet points for Europe here, so I'll read all of these. Just out of the middle of his article. The idea here is that, yet again, the Eurogroup, ECB, IMF alliance, is not ready, politically, to reveal the truth to its various constituencies. They are lying their little heads off. The German and Dutch governments, not to mention the Finnish government, feel it is impossible to tell their parliaments, their own parliaments, and voters the terrible truth that some of the money they have put up as part of bailout Mark II, 1 and 2, and this is to Greece, will not be retrieved. They're doing everything they can, and as I said a few days ago about Wolfgang Schäuble, basically setting the latest deal up so he does not have to admit that Germany is now losing money on the money lent to Greece. Second bullet point, the IMF cannot admit that it allowed Europe to involve it in a country programme, that's Greece's programme, that does not fulfil the debt viability conditions that any IMF programme ought to. Now, I think it's more than ought to. I think it's written in kind of their little constitution that they must have debt viability all worked out. In other words, you can't just keep lending into an unviable proposition. And Greece obviously is an unviable proposition. So the IMF have been dragged into it, kicked into it, tricked into it, whatever. The Greek government has invested its own survival on misleading its constituency into believing that the tailspin of the Greek macroeconomy can be arrested under the current arrangements. But what else can they do? They're politicians. If they were honest and say, look, we're fucked. They're having lots of Greek elections lately because there's fuss. Who's going to vote for the we're fucked party? They're only getting people, rational people are only going to vote for the people that lie to them and say, if we do this and that and this, we'll get out of this, or we can get out of this. So the party's only rational thing to do is basically to lie. And finally, the ECB is struggling to maintain the illusion it can remain faithful to its no bailout clause. That's Maastricht and Lisbon, I think. Maastricht and Lisbon, written in the constitution of, using the word constitution here too much, because I was commenting to Paul about the constitution this morning, that it can remain faithful to its no bailout clause vis-à-vis governments, especially in view of the great challenge awaiting in relation to Spain and Italy. There are rules, and the ECB was set up with rules of things it can do and can't do. One thing it can't do is bail out governments under any circumstances, because those are the rules. But this is a bit boring, this next one. Maybe it's all been a bit boring, I don't know. It's Monday. ECB transition mechanism of monetary policy. Now, this is a very similar transmission mechanism to as any central bank would write up. I'll go through it quickly. You can always pause and have a good look if you really want to. So at the top, the central bank sets the official interest rates. On the left there, top left, leads to expectations. Those are inflationary expectations in the minds of everybody. On the right, money market interest rates are directly affected by the official interest rates, which then knock on to the exchange rate, middle right, bank rates, the mortgage rates, etc., asset prices, whether interest rates are going up or down, and on the left, money and credit, and how much will be given money and credit out because of the height or lowness of the rates, which gives us supply and demand for goods and labour markets coming from the amount that companies and people can borrow. Over on the left, the wages and price setting is affected by the expectations in the mind, the second top left one, which points then down to wages and price setting, which then goes on to domestic prices, which are a concern of central banks. And on the bottom right there is import prices, which is affected by the exchange rate, which is affected on the right hand side there. And it all goes down to price developments in general, which are what the central bank deals in, that we can see. And they're meant to affect all these things to keep it all nice. And this is the transmission mechanism. What the ECB is saying is, because of the way money market interest rates, asset prices, bank rates, money credit, etc. are working out there in the world, our transmission mechanism is broken. We can't get from official interest rates down to domestic prices and price developments because it's broken in the middle. So their interventions, buying government bonds from Greece, Spain and Italy, is to mend that middle bit, so their transmission mechanism will work from the top down to the bottom again. So, and that is what the ECB is allowed to do in their allowed to do list. So they're not saying we're not bailing anybody out. We are mending our transmission mechanism. And you can imagine the argument that'll go on over that. It's in its own way, looking at it from a purely central bank point of view, they're right. But obviously, somebody looking at it from but you're just bailing out Greece, Italy and Spain point of view, are right as well. So it's just about who's got the might in their right. Okay, finish with this from the Financial Times, because FT's been bothering me on energy policy for the last couple of weeks, or the last couple of months really. There've been lots of incidents that I haven't brought to your attention because they've been too small, but this one's very blatant, and it sums up what the FT seems to think. For the past decade, gas prices, that's gas, have indeed been rising. But it is one thing to know the past and another to know the future. In other words, gas prices rising doesn't mean they'll rise in the future. While officials and ministers in government have been working away at one energy plan after another, the world around has changed. The idea of peak oil, the point at which the world's oil supplies go into irreversible decline, has turned out to be nonsense. And that does seem to be, to a greater extent, the Financial Times' opinion on all of this, from what I can gather from various little snippets that they've put in. So it's either their considered opinion of their energy department, or something else is happening. But that is what the FT seems to think. So politicians, if in doubt, will always be able to get out a pink paper and waft it around and say, this is what this mob think, and they are a responsible outfit. And politicians, if they want to do something, will soon find some reason to do it, and find some people to back them up in their claims of what they want to do anyway. I just don't like the taste of it. It has been mounting, as I say, over the last couple of months, and to come out that blatantly, I think it's a bit shocking. That's it for Monday. Have a good week. Bye.